Welcome back. Today, our key focus here is how do materials move into and out of cells. Cells can move things in and out in a variety of ways, but today we're going to focus on examples of passive transport. When you think of the word passive, when you call your friend passive, you're so passive. That means that there's somebody who's just kind of lazy and laid back and like passive. So passive transport means that this movement in and out happens with no energy. Okay, no energy is used during passive transport. The two processes of passive transport that we'll focus on today are diffusion and osmosis. Before we get to the cellular level, I want you to take a moment and use a little imagination here. I want you to think about a time when you're in your bedroom, you're relaxing, you're watching some TV, and then all of a sudden you had this nice aroma, this nice smell of some cookies. And you got all excited because you were like, oh, Mom is baking me some cookies. So you use your inferring skills and you rush downstairs to the kitchen to look and see these fresh baked cookies. But unfortunately, you're a little disappointed. Let me tell you why. So it turns out you're a little disappointed because you rush down to the kitchen and you see no cookies. And you look over on the living room table and you see a delicious candle named Sugar Cookie. Now, how in the world did the sugar cookie smell get to your room? Well, let me tell you, the sugar cookie has a high concentration of kind of that odor, that sweet sugar cookie smell. And as that sugar cookie burns, it gives off its aroma. Up here in your room, there's a low concentration of that smell. So over time, the sugar cookie aroma diffused its way from downstairs and up into your room. So the concentration of the sugar cookie went from high concentration at the candle and kind of diffused and filled the entire house in your room with the sugar cookie smell. So now that you're upset that there aren't any sugar cookies in your kitchen, you hop on the web to figure out what happened. And what happened is that molecules and matter are always in motion, they're always moving. And that sugar cookie aroma came up into your room through the process of diffusion. And diffusion is simply the process by which molecules move from high concentration to low concentration. So illustrated here is a picture of high concentration. See, there's many dots here, high concentration. There's a lot in that little space. And on the right then is low concentration. And diffusion is simply the process where everything in this world likes to be balanced. So because there's more of a concentration over here, they're going to passively diffuse over to where there's a low concentration. And I said passive, and passive simply means with no energy. So this does not require any energy. This just kind of randomly happens. It's a passive process. No energy is involved, where things move from high concentrations and they diffuse to areas of low concentration. The passive diffusion will continue until an equilibrium is met, or until the molecules are balanced. So on each side now, we have a balanced number of molecules. There aren't as many, but there is 12 on each side. Everything in this world likes to be balanced. Okay, if there's something that's hot, it's going to cool off until it reaches equilibrium, until all of its surroundings and environment are kind of at the same equal temperature. Okay, so here is illustrated equilibrium. Diffusion has diffused from high to low, and equilibrium has been met. Alright, so this is a diagram of the gatekeeper of the cell, the cell membrane. The cell membrane specifically is made up of some individual molecules that we've previously talked about. There are proteins here in the purple. There are carbohydrates here in the teal. And the membrane itself is made up of many, many lipid molecules. We said that lipids can also be referred to as fats. So the cell membrane is selectively permeable. And what that means is that as the gatekeeper, it allows some things, but not all things, to pass through its gates. So it may allow some molecules to diffuse in and out, but other molecules may not be able to pass through as easily. I've attempted here to draw a diagram of a cell, and located here I took a couple of cross sections of the cell membrane, and so here are all the little lipids bunched together, and those lipids actually go all the way around the cell, 360 degrees. Okay, and that membrane, remember, is selectively permeable. So some things are able to pass through it, some things are not. So let's look at an example of diffusion. Right now I'm going to draw these green X's are just going to represent some molecule. And right now there is a higher concentration outside the cell than there is inside the cell. So diffusion wants to occur this direction. It wants to go from high concentration to low concentration. Alright, so this molecules will come towards the membrane, which is selectively permeable. It will allow them to diffuse into the cell. That diffusion will occur until there is an equal number on each side. Okay, so they want to be in equilibrium, they want to be balanced. So right now there's a higher concentration outside the cell, so they will diffuse into the cell until equilibrium is met. This is a passive action, no energy is required. This cell now has been doing some cellular respiration, and it has produced a lot of carbon dioxide. So the black circles are going to represent carbon dioxide. The cell does not need those. Those are waste. So they're going to get rid of the carbon dioxide. At the moment, there is a higher concentration of carbon dioxide inside the cell than there is outside the cell. So right now, there's a difference in concentrations, so diffusion will most likely occur here, and it's going to occur by diffusing out of the cell, okay, because there's a higher concentration here. So one by one, these molecules of carbon dioxide will go through the selectively permeable membrane and diffuse outside of the cell until equilibrium is met, until there is no longer a difference in concentration. Inside your body is kind of a mess. There's a lot going on in there, so I'm using some analogies here to try to better explain this diffusion process. So outside your cell there might be some bacteria. So the elephants here represent the bacteria. There might be some viruses. These garbage trucks are filled with viruses. There's other molecules. Here's a basketball to just represent all sorts of other molecules that are moving around outside your cell. And here then are some water molecules. So the cell membrane here, I tried to use a filter as kind of an analogy to the cell membrane. And the elephants here, they're very large, and there's a big herd of them, and they're too large to diffuse through the selectively permeable membrane. And the dump trucks of viruses, too large to diffuse through the selectively permeable membrane. But these water molecules are nice and small, and they have the ability to simply passively diffuse through the membrane. So right now there's 2 water molecules on the outside of this cell and 1 molecule on the inside of the cell. So there's a difference in concentration, and you're going to diffuse from high to low. So they're going to diffuse into the cell because there was a higher concentration outside of the cell, and they're going to diffuse until they reach equilibrium. Specifically, the diffusion of water is called osmosis. Osmosis is the diffusion of water molecules across a selectively permeable membrane. Because cells cannot function without a large amount of water, Many cellular processes depend on osmosis. Osmosis is a form of passive transport. No energy is used by the cell. The plant cells at the top photo have a healthy flow of water, both in and outside of the cell. So it doesn't appear that there is much of a high and low concentration difference. It seems pretty equal throughout. Whereas the plant cell on the bottom seems to be in an environment that is lacking water. So, because the plant cell doesn't want to get rid of its water, you can see its cell membrane pulling away from the cell wall in an effort to try to keep the water inside the cell because it needs that water. And you notice there's no water around the outside of the cell to diffuse into the cell. If the lower picture does not get adequate water, cells can shrink and then die. Alright, so to review, we're trying to answer the question, how do things come into and out of the cell? So the next time somebody asks you that, you could tell them something a little bit like this. There's no confusion about diffusion. There's no confusion about how to diffuse. It's through the membrane, through the membrane, through the membrane, through the membrane. H2O, CO2, O2, they diffuse through the membrane, through the membrane, yeah, through the membrane. It's all about high to low, high to low, high to low, through the membrane, through the membrane, through the membrane. We diffuse through the membrane. Something like that. Thanks for listening. See you later.